So I want to start today's video off with a question. Is there a lens that is attached to your camera more or less all of the time and you don't really give it a second thought as regards to removing it? Well, there is for me, and today I'm going to tell you all about that lens. So let's get stuck in and go take some photos with my favourite lens. So I am indeed talking about my trusty 24 to 105mm lens. Now this lens is nearly always attached to a camera and it's always with me when I leave the house. 24mm, fairly wide angle on a full frame camera. If you've never used a full frame camera with a 24mm lens, you might be surprised at just how wide angle 24mm is. 105mm, short telephoto, you can get fairly punched into your subjects as long as they're not too far away. So I like it for the versatility of the focal length. I'm kind of a zoom lens kind of guy. I'm not a prime guy, I'm a zoom guy. And this 24 to 105, it covers almost all of everything I ever really want to do. My specific lens is a f4 all the way through, so from 24 to 105, constant f4 aperture. Other lens manufacturers such as Sigma, they do make faster lenses than this at f2.8, but my cameras are normally on tripods doing landscapey stuff and I don't really need the faster aperture. So that's one of the reasons why I plumbed for this over the 24 to 70, which is slightly faster but doesn't have quite the focal range on it. My lens has image stabilization. I think it's up to 2 stops, which is not the greatest image stabilization in the world, but if you are walking around handheld and you're just desperate for some photographs, it does the job perfectly well. Now, this 24 to 105 from Canon is technically a kit lens because it comes in the kit with the old Canon 5D3s and I think the 5D4s. It's not a kit lens. Kit lens is a dirty word. It's not a kit lens. It's really sharp. It's not a bad lens at all. I picked this up for just under £300, so it's one of Canon's cheaper L-range lenses. But cheap doesn't necessarily mean bad. So let's get stuck in and let's take some photos with my trusty 24 to 105mm f4 L lens. Go. Right, so I've got a shot set up. We're at 105mm, so we're going to go right for the telephoto end of this. The problem is the cloud. There's a lot of high altitude cloud. It's not 100% coverage, but there's a lot of it. And a bank of it is just blown in front of the sun, and I don't want that. I want the sunlight shining on everything in front of me. It's creating sort of like some hazed, sort of diffused look to the light, and I really don't like that. But what I'm doing is I'm shooting down on, there's a patch of cracked dry mud with some grass as a foreground interest, and in the distance there's a bit of a tributary coming off the river and there's a lighthouse in the background. But looking at the dried mud down there, it's kind of giving me an idea for a second photograph, but I just want to get this one done first. So it's just a case of waiting, just letting some sunlight peek through some of the clouds. The wind's sort of blowing across this way, all the thick clouds over there, and over towards my left it's a bit thinner, so I doubt I'll be waiting too long for some sunlight to appear on this. So it's just a waiting game as usual. There's no point rushing this. I've got a 3-stop ND filter on, graduated ND filter just for the sky, and I've got a polarizer on as well just to pop the blues and bring out the whites in the sky when the cloud does indeed pass. So I'm just going to stand here like a lemon for a few minutes and just see what happens. You see, looking around me, there is light being shined on things, but it's just not with the intensity that I was hoping for. So let's just hang on and see what happens. Alright, so a big stupid band of dark cloud is blowing in front of the sun, and the sun's doing that thing that it does which sets. So I think we're probably just going to have to fancy this one up in Lightroom a little bit. So let's take the photograph. Anywho, so let's expose this nicely. So we've got ISO 200, a 25th of a second, and f11. There's the first photograph done, and I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a 180 because there's a hill with some trees behind it and I quite like that as a subject. I'm thinking like a panorama, maybe black and white. So here's the first photograph. I'm going to spin around and try and set up the second photograph, and I'll pick it up with you once we're ready to take that one.
Caught behind Venetian blinds, out of reach for the city lights. This ain't where I belong. Hey, look at me, man, what I become. I've been running
Right, so what I'm doing at the moment is I'm just using a histogram just to work out some settings for this, and I'm just putting the metering point right over the brightest point in the image, which is the sky, which is going to allow me to get the most detail out of this as I can. Obviously the sky's quite bright, the grass is quite dark, the trees are quite dark, so if we put the metering point over the brightest part of the image, we're going to blow the highlights out, and then we can lift the shadows up a little bit easier a little bit later on, which is giving us a 30th of a second, f11 and ISO 200. Cool, so I'm just going to focus on the dark band of trees, which is about the only subject in this photograph. And I've kind of got just the trees and the grass covering the lower third of the image, and everything else is going to be sky. And when I get home, I'm going to throw a nice 16:9 or 16:10 panoramic crop on this photograph. It's going to need a little bit of composition fettling here because it's quite weighted on the left hand side. There's more trees on the left hand side than there is on the right, which is frustrating. So let me play with this and see what we can do. Let me show you the texture in this mud. It's squelchier than it appears. We haven't had a lot of rain locally recently, so I assume that's why this mud has been allowed to dry out, but it's a bit squelchier than it first has seemed, but we don't really see this sort of texture around here, which I'm quite excited to find it. So the sort of photograph I'm thinking is using this textured mud like this, sort of angled down towards that, and off over in the distance again there are the lighthouses again, which this 16mm lens probably isn't going to pick up too well. But yeah, this is kind of my thinking, just using this texture down here. So let's see if we can find a photograph. Alright, so I had a bit of a walk around, camera in hand, up to face. Probably looks a bit silly in all honesty, but what I've kind of settled on is I like this grass as a subject. I don't really want anything else as a subject in the frame. I think this grass, there's some little bits sticking out of it, some tall grass, there's some little flowers and everything growing in it. I think as a subject, I think that's going to work fine, and I just want the mud as the texture surrounding it. So I'm forgetting all the lighthouses and everything off in the distance. We're just going to get up close and personal with this grass using the mud as the texture. So I'm going to get the camera set up. I've kind of found something that might work. So let's get it set up and see how it looks. Alright, so the photograph is set up. I'm doing something that you'd maybe consider doing with an ultra-wide 16-35, sort of shooting down and emphasising what's in the foreground. So I've managed to set this up as 3 clumps of grass. So we've got the big clump of grass, a smaller clump of grass off to the right hand side, and just off to the left hand side a smaller clump of grass again. I'm not giving any thought really to the sky, because I'm going to crop the sky out of this anyway, so I'm giving no thought to the sky. It's just going to be the 3 clumps of grass and some of the greenery in the background. So we've got the texturous mud surrounding all of these clumps of grass, and there's a little bit of greenery off in the background. So no filters on, 200th, ISO 200 even, f11 and a 15th of a second. Looks alright to me. Here's the final photograph. So thanks for watching today's video, just using my 24-105. I hope I showed you some of the versatility with the lens, using a telephoto shot, a slightly wide panoramic shot, and then sort of faking that ultra wide look, just shooting down at 24mm. So thank you very much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please do give it a thumbs up, because it really does help the video out and it brings new viewers to see my channel, and I would always appreciate that. If you enjoyed it more than that, there's a subscribe button somewhere below me. You can always press that and you'll see more nonsense like this in the future from myself. So until the next time, I'm going to leave it and say peace and goodbye.